Good morning. So, you've heard a lot about Stevie this week and his sudden death and the nightmare that his mother and the rest of his family was forced into. Today, we're going to talk about Stevie's funeral, which, by the way, wasn't easy. What 27-year-old has prepared for his or her funeral? What parent has money set aside to bury a child? When my mother died, I was very lucky because she had prepaid for her funeral, but that didn't stop the funeral home, Snyder's Funeral Home, from trying to upsell me when we went to discuss her arrangements. Now, my mother had prepaid, she had her burial plot, she had her casket paid for. And the casket is where the issue came up. Because when my mother's body was transported to the funeral home, they're like, oh, we need a bigger casket. Yeah, insulting, right? But the problem is that when my mother prepaid for her funeral, and I know when she did this because she told me she did it, she gave me the paperwork. So I would know that when the time came, I wouldn't have to pay for these things. She paid for them in advance. So when the Snyders tried to charge me extra for a bigger coffin, I looked him right in the face and I said, did you see my mother when she came in to sign the papers? Well, yeah. Not to mention the fact that they actually knew my mother personally from going to church with her. I said, so she paid for this casket and I'm not paying one dime more. You get her a casket she's going to fit in at the price that she prepaid and we're good. Otherwise, I'm going to make a stink that you won't even be able to get out from. And they did that. I wasn't paying them one dime more. My mother prepaid for her funeral to make sure that myself and my husband weren't put into a financial situation to pay for it ourselves. And my mother left enough money in her checking account to pay for all of her other funeral services. So I was very lucky with that. And that's something I'm going to talk more about tomorrow. About right of kinship and right of succession and who is next of kin and who gets what and all the crap that happens when someone dies. Especially when someone dies suddenly and completely unprepared for death, as most 27-year-olds are unprepared for death. Here's what happened with Stevie's funeral. It was scheduled with Scheid Funeral Home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, for the week after he passed. Scheid told the family it was going to cost them $12,000. And I'm telling you, these people did not want bells and whistles. You know, we're seeing George H.W. Bush's funeral now. They didn't want that. They didn't want anything major. They just wanted to bury their beloved son, to bury Stevie with dignity. Scheid said 12 grand. And they didn't have it. They didn't have it. So they set up a GoFundMe account. Now, we all know, as I've been talking about on my show, GoFundMe, which unbeknownst to me until just recently, every dollar that we give to a GoFundMe account, GoFundMe takes part of that. I didn't know that, which is why I don't give to GoFundMe anymore. I find the person's name, I try to contact them, and I give them a personal check or I donate right to them because I understand why GoFundMe takes a portion, but I also think that the people who donate, there should be something up on the site that says, we take a portion, GoFundMe takes a portion of your donation so that we know when we're donating, you know? Because I'm thinking when I go to GoFundMe and I give $50, the $50 goes to the person. No, the person doesn't get $50. GoFundMe takes their cut. I don't like that. That's not how I roll when I donate money. If I donate $50 to someone, I want them to get the entire $50. But anyway, so Stevie's family was able to raise on GoFundMe $2,500. That's after GoFundMe took their cut. And they went to Scheid Funeral Home and said, we have $2,500. The funeral is scheduled for this date. Can we give you the $2,500, do the funeral, and we will pay you as we raise more money? Oh, no. No, 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 no. No, see, you don't give me the full $12,000, you're not having the funeral. We're not burying your beloved Stevie. And in fact, for every day that Stevie's body is in my funeral home, I'm charging you $75 per day. Scheid Funeral Home was charging this family rent to keep Stevie's body there because they couldn't come up with $12,000. That, to me, was a jaw dropper, and it should be to all of you, too. And I know how these funeral directors live. I know the Snyders. I know the Scheids. I know the Groffs. They don't live in row homes in the city. They live in nice houses. They make a good living off others' suffering. Just like some doctors who will donate their time to foreigners but kick an American citizen who can't pay the bill out on the curb to die. You know what? It pisses me off. Like they always say, they get you coming and they get you going. So, after telling the entire family and all Stevie's friends his funeral was on one date, now his mother had to go and tell everybody, well, we can't have the funeral now. We don't have the money to pay the funeral home, and they won't do the funeral. They won't do anything until we get $12,000. And remember I told you Stevie had some really good friends? Well, he did. One of Stevie's friends came up to Stevie's mom, and he called her mom too, and he said, Mom, here's $7,000. Let's put Stevie to rest. That's a good friend, right? And I know that Stevie's mom intends to repay this friend every dime of that $7,000 at some point. But what a good friend to offer to pay for his friend's funeral. So Stevie did get buried. He did have a funeral. He has a nice burial site, and his mother is thinking of actually moving from down south back to this area in order to be able to visit her son as often as she wishes. But isn't it a shame? And what lessons are learned from this? You know, when these young people that we have seen on television who have been murdered in mass shootings, Parkland High School, Las Vegas, none of them had thought or even considered prepaying for a funeral. Some of them were 15 years old. And while their parents might have been saving for college or a wedding, they never prepared to pay for a funeral. And apparently funerals are getting really freaking expensive. $12,000 for even the bare minimum funeral? That's a lot of money. Many of the mass shooting victims who were teenagers, they had GoFundMe accounts. They had all kinds of charities coming up and saying, we'll pay for their funerals because the parents were not able to do so. Who assumes that we're going to send our kid to school at 15 years old and they come home in a box? They're dead. Nobody. Nobody thinks like that. But maybe you should. That's the point of this show. Maybe you should think about, especially if you are older. Let's just say you are an older couple and you have children and grandchildren. Perhaps you should start thinking about prepaying for your funeral. It may sound morbid, but it is the greatest gift at a time of sadness at your passing that you could ever give to your children, that they don't have to worry about picking out a casket for you or adhering to your wishes or raising money. Would any of you want your family member to have to go and ask strangers for money to pay to bury you? So please think about it. Jason and I have paid for our funeral. Our funeral is paid for. So if anybody ever tells any of our people who may end up taking care of our final wishes, our funerals are prepaid. I have the paperwork to prove it. Our caskets are prepaid. We fit into them. And our plots are paid for. We're all set. And we don't want any big fancy brouhaha funeral because technically our funerals are invitation only. We're kind of like the president. I feel that if anybody who ever knew me wants to come to my funeral, that's ridiculous. The only people who should be coming to my funeral are people who have invited me to their home for dinner, who have called me on the phone to ask how I am, who have supported me, who have basically kept in touch. Anybody I haven't seen or talked to in 5 years, don't even show up. You're not welcome. And there won't be any room for you because it's going to be a cheap-ass funeral when I die. No priest, no church, no nothing. It's going to be, bam, she's dead. She's getting buried privately. Whatever. Just leave me the hell alone. Nobody should be introducing themselves to people at someone's funeral. Only people who had contact with the deceased or their spouse or their parents or their loved ones should be coming to this funeral. People shouldn't just be coming because, well, we're related, we're cousins, we're blood. No. Don't bother. You're not welcome at my funeral. Just saying. I'm in kind of a persnippety mood today. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. And I'm going to be making an announcement about that next Tuesday. But I am in a persnippety mood, and I am very angry that Stevie's mom had to go through this. I am very angry that a funeral home cares more about their money than they do about laying to rest a young man who died very suddenly and whose death is still a mystery. I get very angry when people who are wealthy beyond our beliefs refuse to put themselves out there and say, you know what? Normally this funeral would cost $12,000, but I can see you don't have the money. We'll take care of it for you. Wouldn't that be the Christian thing to do? Wouldn't that be the thing to do? When you've made all this money off of death, to say to a family who obviously cannot afford your services, we'll take care of you. We are so sorry for your loss. It must be heartbreaking. We'll take care of Stevie. That's our job. And instead to say, well, let's just charge you $75 a night for every night Stevie is in our facility. Oh, and by the way, if you don't pay us by this date, we'll cremate him against your wishes. That's when Stevie's mom lost her mind. She said, you burn my son, I swear to God, I'm going to sue you to the end of the earth. They threatened to cremate Stevie against the family's wishes if they couldn't come up with that 12 grand. Imagine. You have to remember, this was a week after Stevie's mom got that phone call. Your kid's dead. Gunshot wound to the head. He didn't die from cancer. He didn't die in a car accident. Gunshot wound to the head. And by the way, there's some questions about that too. And now she's got to deal with the fact that he was on all these script meds, which we talked about yesterday, that should not have ever been prescribed at the same time. He shouldn't have had all three at the same time. God forbid he was taking them at the same time, which we won't know until the spring. And then the funeral home piles it on. Well, we're either going to cremate your kid or you pay us $75 a day until you come up with $12,000. Wow. Isn't it a sad world that we live in the United States of America? We're supposed to be the richest, most generous, most fabulous country in the world. Until you're a mother like Stevie's mother. And then you see the worst in people. But then again, that friend with that $7,000, then you see the best. So I want you all to remember this as you sit around your tables this holiday season with your kids. And you may want to think about discussing what happens if, God forbid, you die. Who's going to pay for your funeral? Whose responsibility really is it? Because I'll tell you the truth. The funeral homes, at least in my city, they're not going to give you a break. In fact, they're going to try to screw you even after you prepay for the funeral, like they did with my mom. Well, she really needs a bigger casket. Oh, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. We're good. You're not getting any more money. My mom prepaid you to save me from having to deal with this, and I'm not dealing with it. And they made sure that I wasn't charged one dime extra. You got to fight. But isn't it sad that in America you have to fight to get somebody buried? Even if they prepaid, even if you have no money whatsoever. This is what America is, man. And this is what greed looks like. How sad. How sad for all of us. That Stevie almost wasn't buried the way his family wanted him to be because of $7,000. And how sad that the person who was asking for that $7,000 didn't even really need it. We know where he lives. He has a nice house. He's got a good business. And people die every day. He could have taken Stevie's family's $2,500, given Stevie the decent burial on the date his family chose, and not even blinked. He wouldn't have lost a mortgage payment. He wouldn't have lost anything. What he would have been is he would have been acknowledged as a hero on this show instead of the villain he turned out to be. Political Paula, out.